back again with a Princeton, New Jersey institution. Even if you don't know her, you've seen her. That's Mary Anne Haas. Haas. I can't say her name. But prescript. Mary Anne has traveled the world, living and working for the betterment of international education. Supporting education has been her life's work and passion. She did not come to education internationally in the traditional sense as a classroom teacher, but her late husband, Stanley, was a teacher and headmaster in Greece and Rome and other places, and you worked with him. And after his death, you worked in many other international institutions. You came here to Princeton to work for International School Services, and now you are, should we say, the reigning queen of the Weatherspoon Street Grill. They get a free plug. Maybe I'll get an hors d'oeuvre there. And so, we welcome Mary Anne Haas. How are you, Mary Anne?
Thank you.
First of all, let's just say you look smashing.
Oh,
I mean, this is a really
thank
fantastic
you.
getup you got here, and I've seen you around town, and you've got the colors in your hair. Now, this is something, you know, you're not a young person. This is now, where did you get the ideas to go with these colors? I mean, because it's very creative.
Oh, I've been like this for years, and I just love color, and I just love doing these things. And the interesting thing is, you see me walking down the street.
Always. I thought you were a prostitute.
Everybody, you know, and I get a kick out of it because I know sometimes when I'm walking down the street, someone will stop me and they'll say, "Have you been in fashions?" And I say, "No." And then after a while I start to think about it, because my late husband once said to me, "Tell people what they want to hear."
Key to success.
So that happened. The next time someone said something to me like that, I said...
So you say, "I'm Coco Chanel."
I said, "In the past." And the other thing that really I must say is everybody in town knows that I'm 90 because I'm kind of proud of it. But I must say, one day a woman stopped me and said to me, "I hear you're 91. And I thought, I couldn't believe, instead of just smiling, I said, "Actually, I'm really 90. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards I laughed. I thought, you know,
Adam's 12.
I'm vain.
Did some people think you were on the Titanic or something? You know, younger people have no sense of history or time. I guess you can play things. Now, quickly, I'll do a quick synopsis. Born in Seattle, raised by a rabbi as a father, but you kind of left the tribe in a sense when you married Stanley.
Well, I was born in Seattle, the oldest of 5 kids, and I was the only girl. And my father and mother were immigrants from Russia. My father had been a Talmud scholar, and they met in New York through a matchmaker, and my father was offered a job in Seattle, Washington, so you can imagine. Went to Seattle, but he always sort of had to be the head of teaching boys to be bar mitzvah. He was a Talmudic scholar. He goes to Seattle, then comes back and gets married to my mother to bring her there, and said, "It's a beautiful place. You'll love it. Mountains." So they get there, and they had not much money, and they lived in a neighborhood where there was only one other white person. The rest were all blacks. Mm-hmm. And there were Jews that lived in Seattle, but they were fancy and they were what they called the Reform, and they kind of looked down upon people like my
Vivacious Vivian, do you have any commentary? Being of the Jewish stock too, and more, first generation. What is she talking about?
Well, it's funny that you tell this story about something that happened more than 90 years ago, because I have relatives who moved to Seattle about 20 years ago, and they told me a few years ago that where they live in Redmond, the Jews that are fancy now look down on them. They don't live in the fancy neighborhood.
Sounds like it hasn't changed
Now,
much.
yeah.
Sounds very Nouveau
But
Riche to
the
me, but-
interesting part of it was that it was a wonderful experience for me, because that's how I got to know a lot of black people who really used to watch out for me. And then the neighborhood got a little bit, not so good. And they said, Mary Anne, stop walking the streets like that. Anyway, I rebelled at the age of 17. I went to New York after finishing high school.
A lot of Jews in New York, though. A lot of Jews in New York, though.
So, I must say my parents were glad to get rid of me because I was such a rebel. And I lived there for a year, came back to Seattle for a year, moved to San Francisco, met my husband. But I must say, of the four brothers, one died not long ago. And he was really a very sweet, caring person. But all of them are ultra Hasidim. And out of that,
So you're hanging out with the Schwarzes and the Goyim and the Yankees and all that stuff.
well, I want you, and hear me, I want you to know my mother had 5 kids. Out of the 5 kids, she had 47 grandchildren, and I only had 2. So you can imagine. As the years have gone by, I'm the only one that rebelled. And there are over...
And you're still rebelling.
Right, and there are over 500 in that
Okay,
family.
we have to cut you short though, because Bob even warned. I got to cut you short because we got to get in the rest of your life, and I got to get these guys in.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask
So what
questions?
I want to know is your
What?
secret to longevity.
Why aren't you dead yet? She's basically.
Oh, the
asking.
longevity. Well, my mother lived to 95.
Okay,
and
genetics.
And the interesting thing about it is they used to have a saying like, you should live to 120. And when I went to visit her in the hospital, she was, just had not much time left. But even before that, when I used to say you should live to 120, she said, when you're 95, that's not long enough.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
that's the longevity.
Can you do anything about to get him hair?
Ooh, I
Anyway.
like that.
Anyway, we've got to move on. So you have an international background too, and can you discuss a little bit about that in about 6 minutes or less? You were in Greece and then Rome and everything else, and how that helped your life out. And
Oh, well, it was marvelous. It was absolutely marvelous. It did so much for my kids, and I just feel so fortunate. I still hear from people that I knew. I have friends from all over the world.
yeah, you really don't have to pay for a hotel. Airbnb is not your thing. You can stay any place you want, basically.
You can couch
Rome
surf.
was
You can
my
couch
most
surf, yeah.
favorite city, probably because it was the first one that I really, 8 years.
How did you wind up in Princeton?
Well,
Thank you.
we were living in Athens, Greece, and my husband was at first the head of a school, large school in Athens, international, and then he took over this
Go ahead.
near
Go ahead.
East South Asia Council of Overseas School, and I worked along with him. We traveled everywhere, and it was fabulous. Our region was the Middle East, and it was great. And my kids already were living in the States, having their own. My husband died in 1995, and they asked me to stay one more year till the new person could come in. And I got, after the year was almost over, they said I could stay on to be director of development. You know what that means, just a fancy
honorary
title. They never had one anyway after that. But someone that we knew who had been the head of the school in India had been working for the State Department in Washington, D.C., and got offered a job as the head, the president of International School Services. Well, he had applied for it, and he called me up and he said, will you write a letter of recommendation for me? Well, I was glad because he was a wonderful person, and I had this fancy title that had been my husband's title. And 2 days later, he called up and he said, I got the job. How would you like to come and work for me?
Nice.
That's a fantastic story.
And that was in Princeton.
And that's how I came to Princeton.
Okay.
And that was 1996, and so I've been here 20 years.
And I like Mary Anne because she's the one-stop shopping. You're basically you're 3 degrees of separation of anyone in this town. You know them, you've met them, you talked with them, which makes it interesting. Any final thoughts or comments before we move on? We have 1 more minute.
Mary Anne, I think that you're an inspiration to all of us. How many languages do you speak?
Well, I speak, I'm lucky if I speak English well, but I know
understand that.
Italian quite well, and a bit of Spanish. Greek, you know, I could get by because most of the people that I dealt with spoke English. you know.
How about Yiddish?
I know that well. And Hebrew.
And
Boy.
Mary Anne, one Hallmark Hall of Fame ending. One thing she'll say in any language is hello, and she'll speak to anyone. Very welcoming, very giving, very nurturing. Thank you very much, Mary Anne Haas, for coming on. And maybe I could be in your will or something. I'm just asking.
Thank you for inviting me.
With the 500 nieces and nephews, no problem.
Who's your real fan? Who really loves your baby? Who really loves your baby?